Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. In today's episode, we will be discussing the fourth episode of season 2 of Severance, Woe's Hollow.
Woe's Hollow.
The first place that Keir encountered woe. Quite a story for Keir's woe.
Oh boy.
We'll have to break this thing down. One of many things to break down in this crazy episode. We were just discussing last week how the show had accelerated. Wow, like this show is pedal to the metal.
Truly.
Ben Stiller directing once again. Before we get going, just a couple of show notes. First thing I wanted to mention that I was just reading this article today, Sona, by the way, that they're saying that if you have ADHD,
which I believe I do,
if people have ADHD, apparently, according to this study, article was in the Atlantic, but I didn't read the original study, was saying that your lifespan is 9 years less than the average person, which is equal to being a heavy smoker.
But why?
I don't know. That I need. I actually wanted my wife to look at the actual study statistics to see if how this could be pseudoscience for all I know, although this is supposed to be an actual scientific study. So I don't know exactly that, but I did want to bring it up because of the fact that one of the things that helps with ADHD is interacting with long form content like podcast Sona. So I just want to do that. We are doing God's work here.
Saving
lives every day. We are the real heroes, Sona.
I'll take it.
Yeah, so recommend this to your friends and family. You're saving their lives, literally. Email us, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. The only other thing I was going to mention was, the Super Bowl. Any plans for the Super Bowl?
I think we're going to go over to a friend's place for a Super Bowl party, but I think it's kind of like we're just going to stop by and socialize for a little bit. I don't think we intend on staying for the entire game, just to have some human interaction, more or less. How about you guys?
We don't have anything planned right now, and we are expecting like a foot of snow. So are you guys
getting
snow?
a foot? I thought we're only getting 2 to 4 inches, I thought.
I think you're getting less of it. We get 5 or
Okay.
6 inches tomorrow, and then another. It's this is in the overnight, so 5 or 6, and then in the morning another 2 or 3.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for us, driving would probably be inconvenient, but who knows? They could warm up afterwards. Although it's supposed to be really cold. We're supposed to get snow 3 times this week. So
Winter is back.
let's make it come back.
Have to say it's been here for years because I won't have the closure otherwise.
Don't call that a comeback.
Yeah. Okay.
And we continue to cover the series Paradise, another conspiracy thriller, not as dense as Severance, not even close, but a fun watch nonetheless. So anybody who's interested in that, we've been covering here on a podcast, and we'll continue to cover it. Oh, and of course, one more thing I wanted to mention is that we have the Super Bowl this weekend, but next weekend, Sona, Yellowjackets comes back. I'm not sure how we'll be able to cover that show. Are you planning to watch any of that?
I think it does depend if we're covering it or not, how I watch it, but I probably will watch it. And I will say, just tying in, there was something about this episode of Severance that gave me Yellowjacket vibes at times.
Oh, in my notes, I actually said, Irv awakens up in season 2 of the Yellowjackets. I think there is Sona has that moment where we won't spoil it in season 2, where something big happens. And I think she's in the same location that Irv is at, that they are here. They may have shot at the same place. Who knows? They both are shooting around the New Jersey area. This is in upstate New York, actually, where they shot this.
I mean, I had a very Jackie feeling from it, so I'm happy that well, it didn't end well for Irv, but you know what I mean. He woke up.
Yeah, exactly. And went back to sleep. Minnewaska is this national park in upstate New York. And like I said, I'm not sure how we'll cover it here on the podcast. Maybe we'll do like a mid-season and late season. I just thought there's no place on the calendar to cover it. I was planning of maybe covering this with Darren, the other co-host we've had on the podcast recently. But then I don't know if anybody wants to hear 2 middle-aged guys talk about teenage girls. Or maybe it's a whole different audience.
It is mildly offensive to me that you would switch me out on a show that features women.
Sona, I would absolutely include you in there, but we will be talking about Severance and the White Lotus, of course, which comes back on the exact same day. And the Yellowjackets, I don't know if you could do triple duty. That would be
fair point. Fair
But
point.
if you're up for it, we could try
We can discuss more.
3 episodes a week. Then wow, this would be quite. We'd spend more time with each other than anybody else with our spouses.
It's so true.
You are my podcast wife, anyway. So
Aw, thank you. You're my podcast spouse as well. Is there a Valentine's Day for podcast partners?
we should have one. It's coming up. More to the point that right after Valentine's Day, indeed, White Lotus season 3 is coming back, and that's really exciting. And can't wait for that. That's maybe my most anticipated show of the year. Maybe now that Severance is out of the way, we're so deep into it. But
Yeah.
either those two were like a coin toss, but maybe even more so the White Lotus for me. Okay, so episode opens. Irv is suddenly in the second season of Yellowjackets, as we mentioned, on the ice. Be careful on the ice, Irv.
Seriously.
Could they have done a better job of like coordinating these? I'm trying to like in my head play out what did they send them, like GPS coordinates to the Outies. They obviously didn't want them to all come on the same bus because they probably don't want them interacting outside. They suddenly become buddies. They start to compare notes. Things could get sketchy, obviously. But you figure they could have done a better job of at least having them like on the same sea level. But nope. Irv,
Yeah, they're really scattered.
Outie Irv makes a terrible decision to walk out onto the ice. I'm not sure that would be where I would go. But of course, he awakens. He hears Mark, and they climb to the top of the mountain. On the way up, he runs into Heli. Helena, we find out, finally. Big
Yes.
revelation this episode.
But again, speaking to how fast this is all moving, that's the type of thing that I would typically expect to not know for, maybe until the last episode of the season.
Right. This is just apparently like all these things that seem to be the payoffs for this season are all happening very early. I mean, we're not even halfway through yet, which is shocking because you just feel like if they're moving this quickly, they want to set things on the table. And I'm like, this is what you're setting on the table. These are very, very high stakes.
Yes.
He runs into Helena on the way towards the top of the mountain. Of course, she's near the top of the mountain, maybe symbolically as well. Dylan comes running out of the woods and they see this TV. It's very funny that they've placed the TV and run a cable there. Like this is the best way they can convey this information. And this seems to be a DVD player. I just call that out because, well, you know what? They've played DVDs before, or at least CD-ROMs. So I was going to say VHS. I keep thinking they're using VHS. Maybe I'm thinking Yellowjackets again. When they, like, for example, record back and forth between the Innies and the Outies, they're using a DVD or CD of some kind. It turns out they are on an Ortbo, an outside retreat team building occurrence. I love the occurrence. I'm like, it's not an event, it's an occurrence. I love that use of that word. They're at an Egan preserve, which makes sense. I was like, how can they let them out? Okay, I see. It's probably a very controlled, contained environment. Although it seems to be very unmonitored, considering how people just wander off grid later in the episode.
Yeah, I will just chime in to say I have never actually been on a company retreat, but this type of company retreat would be my nightmare. I wouldn't, and I don't think I'd look forward to any company retreat, to be honest, but this, yikes. Although it does turn into like a glamping situation later,
Right.
which I would be interested in. Probably.
Yeah, once they get to the tents, it's actually very nice.
That's true.
But yes, before then, this is truly terrifying, and it's so funny. Like this is actually very funny. This is a funny episode, despite how dark things go. And part of it is all of this. It's the fact, like Milchick's description of the event. Like, look at the foliage. Look at this. I mean, obviously, this was not planned to be a winter event. That's the first thing. It seems like everybody at Lumen's like on the spectrum because they're like, we'll send them there in the middle of the winter. It's like a very bad time for this event, to say the least.
Yeah, I literally was looking at this and thinking maybe in the warmer weather I could enjoy this, but not with all the snow and coldness.
I also like in the cluelessness of this, there is that part of the video where Milchick gets very serious. Like, this is very serious. You're about to discover secrets of the organization. No one is allowed to know. You assume, like, when you do like these kind of team building exercises and it's like a murder mystery or something, they're like winking at you like, ooh, we're going to make this serious. It's going to feel like consequential. But like, it's the wrong tone considering like these people, especially considering like what just happened. It's like, are they trying to murder us? Like, it's not the right time to be having this type of event for sure. And adding creepiness to all of this is their twins that are out there providing guidance. These people better have some heavier jackets nearby, because having these people to stand out there in the freezing cold in their work outfits is a funny detail.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, speaking of the whole Yellowjackets thing, right? There's the whole visions that who's having Lottie's having visions of people pointing in the woods. So this is very much echoing Yellowjackets.
Right?
Parts of it.
I felt it had a whole Yellowjackets vibe to it.
Big time. Yeah, I agree. Oh, we get no title sequence this week. We just get the title.
Right. Yes.
Just Severance on that beautiful cloudy sky. So it turns out all these twins that are showing them around is in honor of Dieter, Keir's twin, which we didn't know about. No twin until now. They have to find their way to the Scissor Cave, a strange description. Doesn't look like a scissor at all, the opening to it anyway, where they find the appendix, the fourth appendix, which apparently is like a secret book no one's seen. I guess the first three appendixes are available in that hall, that museum they have.
Perpetuities.
Yes, right. Where we see, even in previously on, we see that scene where Irv had put the egg into it, one of his first acts of rebellion.
Can I ask you, how interesting do you find all this Keir mythology?
I don't find it that interesting, although
Me
I do.
either.
This one's a little interesting just for the fact that what it might say about, I mean, I think they're trying to say something about our religious stories in general. So I think there is something bigger being said here. I mean, I think more broadly that the show is making fun of some of these belief systems and how they might be formed around some pretty silly stories, right? Like, I mean, I was just talking about American Primeval, the idea of the John Smiths. I dug up this book in my backyard, and I mean, I think there's a direct parallel there between one of these later day evangelists and what's being represented here. Although they founded a company rather than starting a cult. But hey, you think about like Scientology, for example, which began as like a science fiction novel, which then became a religion. So I think they're mocking systems of beliefs in general, imagining a company where these books that the CEO publishes don't become like just a useful self-help book, but becomes like an actual Bible to the company or to the people who work there. Your mileage may vary on all of this. I think it's interesting to examine, we'll get into it, but like this particular story, which is both hilarious, giving it such weight, but once again, I think it's just driving home the point that Keir is probably a crazy person, right? And they're following his ridiculous writings, which once again, maybe that says something about our belief systems in general.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and one that I hadn't considered, because I instantly get a little bit bored once they start talking about all the Keir stuff, to be honest with you.
Well, this story is pretty funny, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You hear them as they're walking through the woods, this important appendix that had to be read out. Apparently, the book covers all four of the Tempers and how he conquered them.
Yes.
His brother, Dieter, he asked him to come into the wood with him and live as paupers out in the woods, like wild, in nature. And that as they made their way through to the woods, he unfastened himself and he fell into rhythm with nature. So he has to like listen to his brother noisily masturbating. Like, okay, interesting appendix. Doesn't seem to be an interesting story to be conveying here, except for what he does to Dieter by the end of this whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
Language here is hilarious once again, which makes me think about the language with Ricken's self-help books also, because the language is very similar. And then it does make me wonder, even going back just to last week, is there some connection that we don't know yet between Ricken and Lumen, or is it just more satire, right? That these kind of silly self-help books end up sounding like these religious texts, right?
Yeah, I mean, this could also be one of those towns where everybody's related to everybody somehow. So there could be a connection.
I mean, it just seems that the more of these writings we hear, the more there seems to be paralleling in the way that they are written. Yeah, and then Dieter, of course, that section ends before they get to the really bloody conclusion. He has spilled his lineage across or upon the soil. But they follow the map. They make their way to Woe's Hollow. they find the seal on the way, another random detail. The only thing I thought about the seal, by the way, is later on when they said they're going to have a lot of exotic meats that they're going to grill up that night. I'm like, were they eating seal meat? Like, it was a seal that someone dropped on the way to the campground? Because maybe that's how exotic the meat got this day. Would you eat seal meat, Sona?
No, but this is a real detour in the podcast. But as you may remember, I only eat cows, chickens, and pigs.
Only animals you had eaten before, right? Before.
Yes, so no new animals. Yeah,
Yeah, so seal would definitely be new. That's a good point.
correct.
Would you let your child try it out if they were being served?
Yes, I am happy to have my child eat any new food that we ever encounter anywhere. So yes.
What if they decide seal is their favorite meat, and now you have to go and like get onto the black market seal
That sounds like, do you
meat?
remember that movie, The Freshman, with Matthew
Oh
Broderick
yes,
and
right. That's right. Wow, that's quite a pull. Yes,
you can always count on me for a reference to a 25-year-old movie.
25. I think it's more than that.
Yeah, that would be just like my kid to decide that his favorite is something that is very hard to find and very expensive.
Milchick is there when they get to Woe's Hollow, looking incredible in this white
Let's
snowsuit.
talk about the outfits.
The
Holy
fits, his
cow.
fits are great.
And he's matching with Miss
Yes.
Wong.
Mhm.
Like it's like an après-ski look. I love it. I would buy that whole outfit if I could.
It's funny that this is the second time, at least maybe more, that he is like right out of a spy movie. I loved him in
So
his black matte.
stylish.
He's in that black matte helmet with the
Yeah.
on the motorcycle, which is right out of like a Mission Impossible movie. And now, like, if he just had like a sniper rifle, like in white, he'd be out of a James Bond movie or something.
It totally looks like a James Bond character. Yes.
Looking great as usual.
Love it.
By the way, my first laugh out loud moment here is when he tells them this is the tallest waterfall on the planet. Oh God, that cracked me up. I laughed so hard. And his line delivery, just so matter of fact, this is the tallest waterfall on the planet. And it's not even that impressive a waterfall, I gotta say.
It was pretty, but yes,
it is beautiful. I mean,
yes.
You know what? This is actually a nit to pick in this episode. We do know that Mark, and okay, maybe two nits to pick. First of all, I wanted to see more of the whole Mark unification and the internal battle that he's probably having.
It was very strange to jump from the last scene of the previous episode to this, which had that feeling of, can a bottle episode take place outdoors? I don't know. I feel like bottle episodes are usually inside. But, you know, it had that feeling of like just a departure from what you're normally seeing, and certainly no direct continuity with the last thing we saw.
Right. And I'm thinking maybe next week's episode, which the description of next week's episode is the team is like dealing with a loss. So, I mean, that seems to be a direct continuation from here. But maybe they do fill in some blanks here because I feel like they need to, on the Outie side of things, explain some stuff that's been going on. I mean, I definitely need to know. And I was hoping after last week's episode to see an episode where Mark is dealing with his unification and the complexities of that. I mean, if this is happening immediately after that, the fact that he's having none of the PD side effects seems strange. I mean, there's one moment.
A moment, yes.
But yeah, I need to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, it feels almost like it was a cliffhanger last week, now that we didn't pick up there, you know?
And maybe the show will jump back in time, which is not, it's done before. So it's possible, but it doesn't, it seems like they're going to continue from this point on. We don't know, like that show could have content from before the event and after. We'll have to wait. And I mean, that's only the midpoint of the season. So there's plenty of time to dig into those other things. I just felt it was a little jarring to go to this and to have no sign, like no indication that Mark is having, well, maybe I'll wait on that because there might be a couple of scenes where something might be going on with Mark. They get to camp. Miss Wong is here. This is quite an internship for her, I got to tell you.
I mean, I loved everything about this. The grilled meats, her appearance in the matching outfit, the marshmallows with the face on it that unceremoniously get dumped into the fire, the glamping tents, all of it. I love all of it.
She's playing a theremin during, I mean, she's even responsible for the music here. It's pretty impressive. And by the way, not only very proficient on the theremin, like as the story takes its dark turn, like she does a really good job of like they must have sat down together and he'd be like, when I get to this part of the story, this is when you get, you let those minor keys get in there, man. Minor tones, I guess, in this case. Yeah, I loved everything at the campfire. I love the design of it too. Just like, like you said, it like looked very inviting with the little heaters inside of the tents. So it looked pretty nice. Where's the leftovers of the meat though? I mean, like it's interesting. They're going to have this whole churrascaria going on and we don't see any of the aftermath of that. So
yeah, I just want to go back to the heaters for a second. Is that typical? Because I've ruled out camping for a long time. I've never been camping in my life because I just feel like it would be so uncomfortable. Is that an easy thing to have, or is that?
There are these new tents that inflate themselves and they're insulated and they have heating elements in them. And we were looking at them. They're not even expensive anymore.
I was really impressed by that.
We were looking at that as an option. My wife is going camping with the Girl Scouts with my daughter in a couple of weeks, but camping now is not at all like it used to be. Like they have a cabin with the electricity and bathrooms and running water. It's not at all what it used to be. But but as far as the tents, we were looking at getting some of these tents and it inflates, which gives you basically a soft mattress to lay on and it has a heater inside. So yeah, and who knows, you could probably attach to your car and have power and everything.
I could get into this.
There you go. Maybe we'll go camping together.
We should. That would be fun.
That would be fun. I used to go camping every year and haven't been in many years.
I know my kid wants to go. We just haven't actually.
Let's do it. Let's go to this place and see, and take some pictures and put it on social media.
In the summer, please.
Yes, not in the winter. We should go now so we can match the shots from the show. It's not a far drive from here, by the way. It was interesting when he hands Mark the torch and he goes, it's, light and the decoration at the same time. And Mark goes, it's beautiful. And I was thinking like, I don't even know how to read these interactions because he seems to be busting balls constantly now. And now he's also unified in his persona. So it seems to be even more prevalent than it was when he was only the Innie version of himself.
And I don't know if it's a camping thing, but I felt like his hair was different.
His hair is becoming more helmet-like in each episode, I think.
I didn't care for it aesthetically, but I just wanted to know it. I felt like there was a difference in the hair.
It's funny that they're definitely going for something with the hair. When you see the scenes, the interviews with the cast in those little documentaries they put at the end of the episode, his hair is significantly shorter. So it's, they're definitely doing something to make that his Mark hair. But he's becoming more and more like the cartoon version of himself where the hair is like almost completely blocking his face. But yeah, he says the torch is beautiful. And then for a moment, I'm like, well, is this Mark actually reacting to this? But I'm like, no, Mark is now the Outie Mark as well. So a torch is not going to be that impressive to him. But it did make me think about how everybody here should be way more knocked out by what they're seeing. Like, you do hear Dylan. And I mean, of course, Helena's lying too. So half of these people are lying about not having been in the outside world. So I guess there's that whole aspect to it. I mean, if I had only ever seen the drop ceiling of my office and all of a sudden there's the sky up there, I would be terrified.
Yeah, it's so vast, right?
Yeah, it's got to fall on top of me, right? It's like terrifying. And I mean, Dylan does mention that. He's like, oh, I knew there wasn't going to be a drop, there wasn't going to be a ceiling, but wow. That's a lot of sky. People should be constantly shocked by what they're seeing, it seems like. Before they have that next reading of the Keir mythology, Helena does a really good job of imitating Heli early on when she goes into the tent and talks to Irv and gives her the sculpture of the little seal in case he gets hungry.
That was so cute.
It was cute. And it seemed very and then he was even a little embarrassed by her, but he won't let it go. He just has a suspicion still. And he's like, tell me what you actually saw. Tell me what actually happened. I know you're not telling me the truth. And this is such a great performance by this actress once again, but her reaction was she's just like, okay. And she turns around and walks out. Like, I'm not entertaining this anymore. That's when I was like, oh, this is definitely Helen. And there's another moment where at this point I was like, oh, this is Helena. And I don't know if it has been the whole entire time. Now I'm convinced it has been the whole time. But at the moment, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, but this is Helena, whether it has been her or not the entire time. But of course, something else happens, which is
Yeah.
so perfect. I'm
Yeah.
like, that moment, I'm like, absolutely. I know exactly what's going.
Yeah. I think they did a good job of kind of switching back and forth to
Yeah.
make you wonder. I do want to note also, we've gone past the marshmallows at this point, correct?
No, no, wait, we're not there yet. We're not there
Oh, we're
yet. No,
not at
no,
marshmallows. I have a comment on the marshmallows more than I've already said. I really love marshmallows. Anyway, go ahead.
yes, we'll get the marshmallows are now. There's a whole bunch of great stuff that happens right now. And then they convene for the marshmallows after apparently eating a lot of meat that we didn't see any of. And Milchick reads from the book. This is incredible. This section here where we find out that Keir witnesses Dieter turning into a tree or something, and then he knows that the water of the pond will quiet his brother's screams. So I'm like, okay, the way I'm reading
Oh
this is
boy.
he bashed him in the head and drowned him. Like, is this what you're reading as well?
And something about gouging his eye out? No?
Well, I mean, apparently he was
Something
just
about
his eye exploded, and as he turned into the tree. But I have a feeling that the turning into the tree is probably getting hit in the head with a branch. Is what I envisioning
yikes.
here.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I definitely read it to mean drowning.
like everybody's reaction
Heard it
here
to
is
mean
just like,
drowning.
oh
Yeah.
my god, oh my god. But that's not even the funniest part of this. Their reactions, because this is a pretty scary turn of events here, and also makes you wonder about the very violent mythology underlying this whole
Yeah,
entire thing.
vicious.
Which,
Yeah.
once again, not for nothing, but the Bible's like full of really grisly stories. I mean, Cain and Abel.
I was about to say
Yeah,
on the tip of my tongue. Yeah.
there's an interpretation of Cain and Abel that they were twins. So this could be a direct reference to the Cain and Abel story, which of course Cain kills Abel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Christian, but my understanding is the Old Testament, especially, is quite violent at times.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But the funniest thing here, the second laugh out loud moment for me was when they get to the end of that chapter, and Milchick, once again, incredible line delivery by this actor,
Mhm.
when he just closes the book and goes, "The end." Yeah, the end.
Onto the marshmallows.
Oh, a couple of weird things I do want to bring up. This is probably stuff you don't like, but it will pay off in that vision quest he goes on that night. This is when he meets Woe for the first time, I guess, in the woe of murdering his brother or
Yeah.
his loss of his brother. And in this case, Woe is an actual old woman who's tiny. So, just a
Ugh.
bizarre detail.
Yeah, I don't like any of this.
Yeah, I'm sure this was not your favorite thing. But I think more importantly is the fact that he killed his brother and then felt terrible about it afterwards. And he's turning it into this weird mythology.
Yeah, that's the bottom line here. Yeah.
Right, right. Because of this description that he looked at his brother before his brother's eye explodes out of his head and he dies, he realizes that his brother sees them as being paupers forever.
Yeah.
And in my notes, I'm like, I don't know if he killed him because he was a noisy masturbator or a chronic masturbator, or because he's just like, I need to, and this is where I think it is more interesting. I picture someone who is creating this mythology to rationalize their own actions, where he is obviously loyal to his twin brother, and they probably grew up together as best friends, as twins always do. And he's like, I want something else. And the way he decides to get himself out of this is by killing him off, which is, obviously the most extreme way you can sever yourself from your, loved ones.
I often hear from people, I personally never did this, but I often hear
Kill
from
the
people
twin.
that, not that or the other thing I'm about to describe, that as a child, they decided to run away.
Right. Yes.
And, packed up their little bag and went into the backyard or the field or whatever. And after a few hours, they were kind of like, okay, I guess I'll go home now. Right. So it kind of had that feel of they decided to run away to the forest. And then at the end of the day, Kira's like, okay, time to go back to father now. And the brother's like, what are you talking about? This is our life now.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he had to kill him.
I would like to read the next chapter with Keir and the naughty nanny. I have a feeling, I don't know which one that relates to, but that naughty nanny is going to end up dead at the end of that story too. I have a feeling Keir may be a serial killer. Yeah, and then of course the witnessing of his wantonness is what leads to all this bad stuff. But interesting, this is where Helena could still be Heli at this point. Heli starts laughing at the story like immediately. And Milchick is really upset about this because it of course
Really
makes sense,
upset.
even more sense in retrospect, where he's like shocked by this because of course this isn't even Heli, this is Helena.
That's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't considered that. That's a good point.
And I think this is a revelation we're all having here. I assume that Helena and Heli are very different. So that's where I really didn't believe it was her this whole time, because how could she convincingly pull this off? Now I'm starting to think that Helena and Heli are probably more similar. And the Helena performance of having to be this is really the performance, right? That she probably does laugh at the Keir mythology. She's probably like, this is probably closer to the person she is. And we can save that for the scene where they finally make love. But I mean, I think that is an indication there as well, because she seems to be an honest version of herself there. That does not seem to be the duplicitous version of her, which is probably the most interesting scene in this whole
Yeah, I mean, well, it's not the same thing, but the first day that Heli joins them, remember, she's kind of laughing. The numbers are scary. I'm supposed to find the scary
right.
numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everyone's like, you'll know. So Heli herself, the inside Heli, does have that questioning sarcasm, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's more interesting to think that the Helena persona would laugh at this mythology. You think that she
yes,
might
for
be
sure.
a company player, right?
Yes.
But yeah, she calls it out right away. She's like, oh, yeah. And she doesn't even get to the darker elements of this thing, right?
Right.
Like, oh, he just melted. And it's like, no, I don't think that's what happened. I think he died by someone else's hands. But of course, all of this, Sona, leads to those beautifully printed, very evenly shaped marshmallows. That's a little off-putting, I gotta say. Like, no marshmallow should look that perfectly shaped.
You know,
But
you can buy the square ones now to make
that's
s'mores.
true. Good point. Yes, for s'mores. Good
Yeah,
point.
we
Mhm.
have them in my apartment right this minute, even though it's not s'more season. I'd like to have them on hand should a
Just in
s'more
case.
making opportunity arise. I love marshmallow. I love s'mores, but I love marshmallows even more. And a toasted marshmallow to me is such a delicious treat that I was so excited about them. And then what I really
Into
loved
the
was
fire.
everyone's dismay at the decision
Yes.
to throw away the marshmallows, because it was like they were all kindred spirits with me in the love of marshmallows. I'm looking forward to them and devastated by the fact that the marshmallows went right into the fire.
Marshmallows are for team players. They don't just hand them out. I think
Hysterical.
they're not that expensive, but but yeah, you know what? These people probably have not had marshmallows. A missed opportunity.
Yeah, instead of a melon party, they should have a marshmallow party.
So my question for you, Sona, would, given what you're saying, you're probably going to say yes. Some of the edge marshmallows, you going to get in there before they
What?
catch on fire? That is,
Grab them out of the
just
fire.
grab one out of the fire. Some of those are
You
like near
know,
the edge. You know what I mean?
uh,
No.
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And now it's like they're pre-toasted. Milchick was so angry that I don't think I would risk angering him further by trying that.
Milchick was very angry. Yes.
Tempting though, like kind of a 5-second roll situation.
We should have known the Helena thing right here. He gets angry at Dylan. He's like, marshmallows are for team players, Dylan.
Hmm.
It's like Helena's the one who's leading the charge here with the goofing on the story.
Yeah.
And then this scene gets really ugly. Another great, great scene where you see the dynamic here. It starts off funny, by the way, where, Irv, even though Irv is in the right, he keeps pushing Heli, like, don't make goo-goo eyes at her. And Dylan doesn't know what's going on. He's like, goo-goo eyes, what's happening? And it's funny. He goes, tell us, Heli, tell us about him. And this actually at first made me laugh, where he's so fixated on the night of
The
Gardner.
night gardener. And it was reminding me of like that could be a movie. There's the night manager,
The
the
night
night
gardener.
agent. Why not the night gardener? It's like the constant gardener combined with anyway.
There's a script somewhere in the works. And it'll probably be available on Apple Books soon.
True.
He won't let it go. And he's like throwing all these details in. And I actually thought it was kind of funny. But then he is making a point here. He's basically calling her out. And this is when I knew it was Helena. And it's so perfect because this is actually what gives it away to Irv as well, like later on, or tells it even more about her, was the cruelty, right? When she says he's sad because he's not going to see Bert anymore. And it's not only that he just like, she says it in a sympathetic way. She gets a couple of digs in there. It's so perfect. I was like, ooh, that's Helena.
Yeah. She tries to cover it up almost immediately after.
She does.
But yes.
Yeah. Soon thereafter, Irv feels like everybody's turned against him, including Dylan. He wanders into the woods with his torch. And then this is when Helena and Mark are together. And even then she like sees, oh, I felt bad. I was cruel to him. And it's interesting to see Helena saying these things, right? Because now we know for sure it's Helena. But more importantly is the scenes between her and Mark, and the conversation she has where she says that she doesn't like the person she was on the outside, still pretending to be Heli, but obviously talking about herself. And she says, I was ashamed. The way she like almost whispers that was like really powerful. And then he says, I don't care who you are on the outside. I just care who you are with me, which is all very sweet. But then there's that flash of seeing Miss Casey there, or of course Gemma, more importantly. And this is the two sides of Mark now starting to battle potentially. What are his actual goals here?
I also thought that was a very sweet comment about, it doesn't matter who you are out there. It's what's in here that matters. I found that moving for whatever reason. And I don't think I'm a puritanical person. I just don't like that they had sex. I don't know why.
Really?
I don't like that the show went there. Now I'm afraid of like a soap opera, like unplanned pregnancy that's going to make a mess. Right. I mean, I hope they won't do that.
Helena uses birth control. She probably has very controlled persons.
Yeah, that's a good point. She probably does. Okay, that makes me feel better. Yeah, I don't know why. I just didn't care for it. It's not that I thought it was like graphic or anything like that. I didn't want that for these two characters right now. Whether Helena or Heli, I would not have been happy with it. I can't put my finger on why though.
What's interesting is I didn't want them to hook up either because I thought it was just adding, given the circumstance, it seemed to be the wrong thing to do for these characters. Then again, they probably won't have this opportunity again. So I can understand it as well. There's something interesting that Dan Erickson, the writer, said in the post-episode featurette. He said that the season 1 was about childhood. And season 2 is more about adolescence. So it's the rebelliousness that's coming forward, but also, of course, the sexual experimentation as well. So I kind of see that. It's like they go on a camping trip together and stuff happens, right? So I see that aspect to it. But more importantly, I think that even though I didn't really want it to happen, I did think it's interesting in two ways. One is I thought that the scene itself ended up being very touching in its way. And then retroactively, a little disturbing because he's now had sex with Helena. He did not have sex with Heli. And in a way, it's kind of a violation of him because obviously she's duplicitous to him, right? Even though I don't think she's trying to be, but it's like, it's a very weird gray area they've stepped into in an interesting way.
Maybe not trying to be duplicitous, but she fully knows that he thinks she's someone who she isn't.
Well, I mean, she's definitely duplicitous. I shouldn't have said it that way. I don't think it's malicious. I think she actually...
I'll go with that.
But at the same time, absolutely, the duplicitous, she is having sex with him under false pretenses, obviously, right? And now this is going to make things very sticky between him, no pun intended, between her and Heli, because he's going to have to be like, well, I was fooled by her. And she's like, what happened that night? It's like, well, actually, that person you despise, I had sex with her. And she was pretending to be you, and I didn't notice. Like, it's really going to be a problem. So, long story short, Sona, I don't think they're going to be having sex again anytime soon. So don't worry about that. Irv gets lost in the woods and drops his torch. And I actually thought he was going to die here. And I guess he does die in a way. But for a while there, I was like, oh my God, are they going to kill Irv off here? What a surprise. Like, that would be a total shock for this episode, obviously.
Yes, especially coming into it with the Yellowjackets state of mind, I was very concerned.
Speaking of Yellowjackets, this dream sequence, which is beautifully done, by the way, is very creepy.
Yes.
Like he sees the moths around there's a cubicle in the middle of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
He sees this woe character with a little bit of a jump scare, which didn't really jump for me, but I don't think it's intended as a jump scare. But of course, he sees Bert, and then he correlates that to his woe, of course. And he also wanted to die. There's actually in the previously on, there is that scene they play out between him and Dylan where he says, I just want this pain to be over. So in a way, he does complete that mission he started in episode 2, but he decides to put it to good use. But when he wakes up, for some reason, I actually thought that he had seen something in the numbers, like he kind of understood it. And maybe it was because he had gotten so close to death. So maybe he did. But I think the revelation he makes when he wakes up right away is the question he says to Heli later on, right? If this isn't her, then who would have the power of coming down to the severed floor, right?
Yes.
When they wake up the next morning, Irv is alive, obviously. He has made this revelation. He goes looking for Heli. Heli has wandered off. She's going to Woe's Hollow for something. She's also, maybe given what happened the night before, having questions about her motivations or what happens next. And this is another one of these signs that not everything is right with Mark. Mark wakes up and it's as if he's surprised. He doesn't know where he is for a moment. So I thought that there's something going on there with his dual personas.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he goes looking for Heli, can't find Heli. Dylan, Milchick, and Heli and Irv have found each other by Woe's Hollow. And I love this scene between Irv and Helena, even before it gets violent, where he says, hey, kid, such a weird way to address her. Although he does like, hey, kids, what's for breakfast in that, or what's for dinner, I guess it was. In season 1, he used to always say that as like kind of his
I
phrase.
hadn't remembered that, but now that you say it, yeah.
But it's weird when he says, hey, kid, what are you doing down here? And it was such a perfect phrase because it's like as if he's saying to Helena, like, what are you doing on the severed floor? Like, what are you doing down here? And I was like, as soon as he said that, I'm like, oh, he knows exactly what's going on. And he says, Heli was never cruel. And he really commits to this.
Really?
I guess it is
maybe
him.
the story got in his head.
Well, maybe. I mean, this is another drowning at Woe's Hollow, right? So there definitely is a connection there for sure. He gives her a nice ice plunge. Her pores are definitely tightened after this.
So good for your skin. Your hair too, really.
Probably. She's going to look great after that. And he's like, you're threatening. I'm going to actually kill her. She finally yells out to Milchick to do it. And of course, they remove the Glasgow block. I have no idea what that is, but I guess.
And she says in that moment, Seth, not Milchick. A millisecond early giveaway too.
And of course, immediately Irv picks up on this. Yes, Seth, do it. And then all the fallout from this, hopefully not like last week, there will be some immediate consequences to this because there's so much fallout here, right? They have everybody thinks Irv is nuts, and then Irv is drowning her, and then they probably think that he's drowning their friend, only for the revelation that Heli has basically been in prison this whole entire time. Heli is back, and then Irv is like very sweetly like apologizing to her and nursing her. And then Mark comes down, and then of course Milchick and Irv. These interactions are great because Milchick is obviously so angry, but the stuff he says is going to have consequences for Lumen as well. He's like, basically saying like it's going to be like you never walked the earth at all. Like he's so vicious in what he says to him. And it made me think about the fact that all these innies, even in the best circumstances, this is what's going to happen to all of them, right? So it's like, I don't know if there's any good outcome for these innies, and they're probably coming to this realization that they need to do something about their circumstance.
It almost made me forget for a second that there is still an outside version of him that will continue to exist and could do other things with his life.
Yeah, and Mark must be just like really 100 things going through his mind. I like the way that Milchick describes this. He accuses Irv of attempted collegial murder.
Yes, collegial murder was the best. Who among us has not wanted to attempt a collegial murder?
In the pond of woes Hollow. But yeah, then he turns to him, turn around, don't talk to the innies anymore. And then that stare down between the two of them is so intense. Weird last words, by the way, between Irv and Dylan. He goes, Dylan's going to be okay. Just remember, just hang in there. That's not what I would expect to be their parting words.
Isn't there a poster in one of the rooms, like the
Yes,
kitten
the
with the
cat. Yeah,
branch, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then he walks into the forest as he says those things that, you are going to be erased. No one will remember you.
Okay.
Yeah, Irv exits his POV like a perfect bookend, very much like a bottle episode, like you mentioned. This is like, the beginning and ending bookends of entering his Innie POV and then theoretically the last exit from his POV ever. And that's it. How did you feel at the end of this?
I think I texted you like, wow, that was a
That was
lot
a
or
lot, right?
something,
Yeah.
something like that. And that sums up my feeling. It was overwhelming. And honestly, the first 5 minutes into the episode, I was kind of like, I don't want this. I don't
Right.
want to watch this. I don't want to see this. I don't want to process this. I don't want to think about it. I don't want this. Get back in the office.
Right.
But so many interesting things did happen that it drew me in. Plus, I saw the outfits on Miss Long and Milchick. So it was almost like, despite myself, I ended
Yeah.
up interested in it and liking things about it, which I give the show a lot of credit for, given my aversion 5 minutes in. They really turned me around.
I think that is the part of the appeal of the show. I felt, by the way, had the exact same experience you had where I'm like, okay, they're on the outside. I knew they were going to be on the outside, by the way. And
Mhm.
so when you were like, wow, that was a lot, I'm just expecting it to be a lot of this outside stuff and maybe some more mythology. In the first 11 minutes, where there's very little dialogue and there's just these creepy people pointing and then they're walking through the cave. And there was some humor in there, like the office video that's saying like, notice the beautiful flowers. And I'm like, what flowers? It's like middle of winter. So that stuff made me laugh. But in general, I was kind of like, okay, this is a lot of the weird for weird sake stuff going on.
Yes, exactly.
I'm like, is this the whole thing going to be like more mythology building? And of course, you have the whole Keir story, which I thought was
Yes.
funny again, but it's that weird, leaning way into the weirdness. And then, like you said, and then of course, what the show does so well, every time you think it's going off the rails with goats and stuff, it brings in the character stuff, which is so powerful. And
The
so
humanity of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then you really sympathize for the situation. And it's almost like and that's what's funny about it. Like everybody's so caught up in this mythology. A subset of the audience, I'd say, is caught up in the mythology itself and interpreting it and what's the conspiracy, etc. But I think for me, and I think for you as well, and probably for most viewers, the real power in this is just we love these characters. They're in this horrible situation, and it's an impossible situation, right? Like Irv exits the severed floor, which means that he's erased this version of himself. These people are in an impossible situation. Of course, we're there to see if them try to get out of this impossible situation, right? And everything else is just the framing of that. Honestly, the more they lean into all that other stuff, it's probably not what we're most interested in. Although I am somewhat interested in that stuff. Like I do want it to pay off in some interesting way. When they spend too much time on it now, I feel like if you're not going to answer questions, I don't need more myth building,
Yeah. Well, I already said how I feel about that.
Yeah.
So I get
And
it.
the goats.
Definitely don't need more goats. Hey, can I bring up something from the last
Sure.
episode that I
Absolutely.
forgot to mention?
Absolutely.
And it was killing me that I forgot to mention it to you because you asked me directly what I thought about this scene and I forgot to say it. When we see Dylan at home,
Yes.
after he has met in the family visitation suite with his
Yep.
wife, are we to assume that she is not allowed to discuss this visit with him, with the outside version of him? Because that's all I would be doing all night, is I would be detailing every single thing about what I saw and the conversation I had. I would be like, let me fill you in.
Yeah, I don't know if that is part of the agreement. And even if it was, it's not like they couldn't have that conversation. I actually thought that I agree. That was very interesting part of that. That's why I mentioned that they have such a interesting the dynamic is so different, it really shows you how that relationship is, in a way that she can't have this conversation with him, because absolutely, like, this is all you want to mention, like, hey, I met this version of yourself, and even if you didn't want to be like, I like that version of you better, or reminds me of a better version of you, obviously you probably don't want to have that conversation, but you could have just been like, wow, it's just so weird, she didn't know who I was, and I wasn't kind of, I understood that, but I didn't really understand that. The fact they can't even have that version of the conversation,
Yeah, I saw
I'm
you
pretty
this
sure that's
picture.
not,
You asked if we lived on a ranch. Like, isn't
yeah,
that funny, right? Like, because think about when something happens in your day, right? And you think, and something mundane, and you think, oh, I can't wait to tell my
right.
spouse about
Mhm.
this, right? I mean, this is so far from
Right.
mundane. I thought she must have signed in a non-disclosure agreement of some sort where she can't get into details, because how could you not be dying to tell your spouse about this?
Yeah, but I mean, how would you even get into trouble for that? Even if he said, even if she would have said, well,
Yeah.
I'm really not supposed to tell you details, but you really should know this.
Something, right?
It was
Beyond,
so
like, I think
weird.
they just had an exchange of like, how did the visit go? It was good, right?
Right.
I think that's all they had. And that to me was insane.
I think that's what's important about the scene, is that they don't talk about it. It tells you a lot about where their marriage is at right now. She's working nights, he's working days, that probably
I
just
guess.
passing.
I
And
mean, just on a human level, though, like this is so far from mundane, and that's the only person that you can really share it with.
oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. No matter how badly I could be in the biggest fight with my spouse, and I would be like, I still have to tell you what happened today.
We're gonna put the fight on the back burner for a
Yes,
minute,
hit the
because I
pause
got to tell
button
you
because
this.
I gotta tell you.
Yeah, it's pretty funny that they don't have that interaction, or unless it, and this is remains to be seen, unless there's something so uncomfortable about that. Like maybe it is because he like, for example, was disappointed with his, when he
Yeah,
finds out about his Outie, and maybe
yeah,
she doesn't want to open that can of worms
get into
potentially.
that,
So it
I
could be something like
guess.
that. But I do think it says a lot about where their relationship is right now, which, by the way, dovetails with something I wanted to mention to you
Great.
about this exact same scene, which is, or the dynamic of it. I had a theory that I did not connect these dots. I've had a theory since my speculation episode, where I was thinking Milchick, I think, given his behavior and how much of a rule follower he is and how dedicated he is to Lumen, I have always thought that Milchick is an Innie. He's an all Innie.
You mentioned that in the first episode when we talked about the first episode, that theory. Yeah,
And I've been thinking about that for multiple episodes now, and even in season one, because of, there's some weirdness to his behavior. Obviously, you can tell. And he's
sure.
also such a loyal company man.
Super loyal. Although beginning to question it after the pictures, but yes.
Right. And then I heard read a theory that said that maybe there is a reward at Lumen, where the Innie's final reward is that the Innie can be the whole person.
Hmm.
And then, given how Dylan is always looking to overperform and score these rewards, the writer of this article was saying that maybe what we're setting up here is that Dylan could be given a reward to be the permanent, his Innie can permanently replace his Outie. And this is why we're starting to see this dynamic where he's kind of disappointed in his Outie, and maybe he's like, I could do better than him. And then maybe that is a possibility, right, of what's actually going to happen there. What do you think about that
Interesting.
theory?
Hmm. I need to mull that over a little bit more, but it's an interesting idea. That's a long way from like a fidget spinner.
Quite.
But yeah, I guess it's like at the arcade when you can get a couple tickets and get an eraser, or you can hoard all your tickets and get a PlayStation. I guess it's the PlayStation version of it. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would explain the Milchick thing, and it would also be an incentive for Dylan, for sure. You can imagine Dylan becoming really like a spy for them now, even with Helena potentially having to be off the board. What do you think has to happen here? Just a couple of things that I think have to happen on the show. Outie Mark, if he didn't already know, and this is something that I'm a little ambiguous on here, not that he knew that that was Helena, But I have to assume that Outie, Mark, after the unification, had to have done some research on like the Lumen website, looking for anybody that might match up, and had run into Helena. And if somehow he had not found her LinkedIn profile or her, a bio on the website, or one of these videos that we saw playing during that event, if he hadn't seen that, he definitely is going to do his Helena research now. Don't you expect that that's going to happen pretty soon?
This is something I hadn't thought about before, but yes, that makes sense.
And then it'll be interesting because you could potentially have two people who are, in a way, unified, bridging the gap between the Innies and Outies.
Yeah,
Now,
I think this gets into what we discussed earlier too about the whole Mark unification process
right.
is still such a mystery to us as to where it stands and how this merge is happening and what is being processed and the information that's being known.
Right.
So I think it all flows from that as well.
And another thing that I am pretty sure absolutely has to happen, and maybe we haven't seen the last of Innie Irv, because hear me out on this one, there's no way that when he turns his back right now and turns into Outie Irv, that Mark, who of course is bridging these two worlds, will not track down Irv somehow. He could probably talk to Ragabi. She probably knows where Irv is, or he can find him some other way. And maybe we'll propose to him that, hey, we can bring your Innie Irv together with your Outie. Not only do we get to spend more time with Innie Irv, like they get to compare notes at some point. But I have to assume at this point, he's got to go track down Outie Irv.
First of all, I will say I want to see more of Irv, whether inside or outside. So just generally speaking, that's my opinion.
Oh, they can't. I do not think they could get rid of John Turturro. No way. That's not
fair
possible.
point. Things it leads me back. I don't want to be like a broken record, but I don't understand enough about the unification process and what he knows and what he doesn't know and what translates from world to world. And so, yes, I agree with you theoretically, but I don't understand enough about how this process works.
I'm also really curious about seeing how the show is going to deal with that. It's almost as if what I want to see is the two Marks literally arguing with each other, like on opposite sides of a table. But even though I say I want that, I don't actually want the show to represent it that way. But I do want to see this conflict. I want to save Heli, Heli. I want to save Casey, or I should say Gemma, right?
Yeah.
They're vested in different versions of the world. They want different things. And I don't want it to be like he's just unified somehow and reconciled these things. They're at odds with his goals. And I think that is potentially, we see it in the trailer, right? In the opening sequence of the series, that animation, there is going to be some battle between the two of them. And I need to see that somehow. I don't know how they're going to visualize it though. I don't actually want to see the two body double, like getting into a fist fight in the middle of the kitchen. But Fight Club, like.
Yeah, because the idea had been that they didn't need to reconcile those two things because it's outside Mark that's looking for Gemma.
Right.
And inside Mark is having his own thing going with Heli. But now that separation can't exist anymore.
Right. And any Mark, like we've discussed here multiple times, think about these people who are being eradicated by their outside selves, theoretically, like any Heli has been erased temporarily, at least, and maybe permanently, if she could have it set up that way, by Helena. And, if they didn't need Heli as they maybe would have erased her anyway. My point is that internal Heli character, she probably wants to live. And the only way to do that is to destroy this Outie version. And Mark now has to deal with that potentially really angry Innie version of himself. Like, why did you do this to me? Right? Why did you put me in this circumstance? That is, for me, what is fascinating about this whole idea. And also the fascinating, not only about having the two halves, but trying to unify them afterwards. These two people, and maybe this is where the twinning concept comes up here too, have different agendas and what's going to happen when they butt heads, literally, or share a head. And I guess hopefully the show does not get too into the weeds with the mythology and not do this work, because this is what I really want to see. And they've done a great job so far of putting a lot of things on the table. They've set this all up. And most importantly, by getting so quick to the unification, we get to deal with all of these battles between the Innies and the
Yes.
Outies. So they have that opportunity. I don't want to get too many goat digressions. I want to focus on this stuff. This is the stuff I want to see more of. And I do think they're going to do that. So just to be clear, I don't want to read too many more stories about Keir murdering his nanny for whatever reasons. That's fine. A little seasoning. That's fine. But don't make that the main course.
I agree with you completely. And I think, maybe there's a separate conversation to be had about what we've been talking about a little bit this whole time about like kind of the separate types of fandoms for this show and what we're interested in. And I think there is a fandom that's saying more goats, bring on the
Oh,
goats. I want to
absolutely.
know more about the goats, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're trying to walk a line to keep everybody engaged, but
Yeah.
I am with you. Less goats, please.
That's right. Unless it's one of the exotic meats. That's not exotic, though, I guess, for most people.
Yeah, a lot of cultures eat goats.
It's true. Absolutely. All right, Sona, thank you. Again, we are a week away, just a week away now, from the premiere of Yellowjackets next Friday. I keep mentioning Yellowjackets. I don't know why. We're probably not going to cover it week to week here. Almost
We
certainly
have
not
talked
going to
about
cover
it so much today. It almost feels like it's like subliminal advertising for
We have to do this
Yellowjackets.
now. Yeah, we have to do it now. We have to talk about Yellowjackets. By the way, I gave up on the Dexter show. Did you keep watching that at all?
We are still watching it
You're
and
still
we are
watching it. Wow.
interested. Yes.
It's wrapping up next week. I think the same week Yellowjackets premieres. Yeah, I quit after they took that little break. I think they had 4 episodes and then they took like a week off.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. I didn't go back to it. Mini review here so far on the season for people who did drop off. What's the sales pitch? Is it just more of young Dexter, or is there a mystery that has hooked you in? Is there something else going on there?
Yeah, I mean, there was kind of a big twist, which I was surprised by the twist. I think, it is very hard to stand in the shadow of original Dexter, which
Yeah.
was amazing and groundbreaking in, I think, the story that it was trying to tell. But because I have that attachment to these characters that we're seeing decades earlier, that probably is a lot of what's keeping me going. If I came upon it without watching original Dexter, I probably would
Yeah.
not be as interested in it. But like it's fine. Like it's a fun thing to watch to pass the time, kind of, standard TV fare.
Here's a question I have for you, maybe crystallizing it a little bit. If they did another season of this next year, would you watch another season?
I might. I don't feel strongly one way or the other.
Ambiguous.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do with this whole Dexter resurrection situation.
That's another thing that really worries me, by the way. I saw only in the headlines, I didn't even read the article, but I did see in the headlines that just about a month ago, I think it was, Michael C. Hall was, announcing to his Instagram followers or whoever that they had done their first day of shooting on the new Dexter show. Oh, they pushed the release date back because, usually when you wrap up shooting a show, about 3 or 4 months later is when the release comes. I'm like, they were saying this is going to come out in the summer. It looks like they're not going to make their dates. And then the same day, the producers at one of these, like the events where they are pitching their shows for the year, say they're still making their production dates. And I'm like, oh man, you guys are going to be rushing through this. I mean, maybe they've already done a couple of these spin-off shows, so maybe they have it down to a science, but it seems like a very short window to be. This could be a rush job, is my concern once again with these shows. So anyway, I'm a little wary of it all, I have to say.
I think one thing that I've realized by watching the original Sin version of Dexter is I think the lead actor is doing a fine job. I have no complaints about the lead actor, but I do think so much of regular Dexter was carried on Michael C. Hall's charisma, right? Making you root for a serial killer, that whole thing. I guess that's part of the reason that I'm interested in seeing this new version, to see how that charisma carries through in
Right.
this new storyline because I think he is a really great actor, very easy to watch, fun to watch.
I think they know this too. They even have him narrating this prequel.
Right.
He is why everybody's there. So, I mean, they hope, I'm sure he's getting paid a lot of money and that's why he keeps coming back to this. But I guess he's worth every penny as far as keeping this franchise alive. Yeah. And then, so Yellowjackets is coming back same week that wraps up. Once again, given my lack of commitment to the Dexter show, maybe we'll sample Yellowjackets. See, what I would say is some reviews have come in from Yellowjackets, which is an encouraging sign, which is that everybody's saying that season 3 is like what people wanted season 2 to be, where it now starts the momentum picks up, they start solving these mysteries. So I do like that, because my concern always with Showtime shows, they would never do what Severance is doing this season, where
Just
they're like,
moving it
we
along.
need to burn through the plot because we got big things to do. For me, it's like Showtime shows in general. It's like, oh, we got a hit. And everybody's just like, okay, can we slow the plot down so there's barely a revelation, maybe one a season, so we can keep this thing going for 10 or 12 years. And I'm like, oh my God, I do not. That's the kind of pacing I can't handle. Yeah, and that's always my concern with Showtime. So, and Yellowjackets did seem to fall into that trap last season, but they looks like maybe they know with the drop off in audience that if they want to keep that audience engaged, and it's their most popular show or second most popular show right now, they need to answer some questions and move the plot along. So maybe that's a good sign. We'll have to wait and see. But more importantly, The White Lotus is coming back, and we will absolutely, definitely be talking about that pilot episode. So next week, we'll talk about Severance, episode 5, mid-season finally. And then just a couple of days later, we'll be talking about The White Lotus.
Great.
And maybe spend yet again another few minutes talking about the premiere of Yellowjackets. Maybe.
I swear, if we had $1 for every time we said Yellowjackets in this podcast, I think we've got to be over 50 at this point.
I might have to edit some of these out when we get to the final edit.
These people are obsessed with Yellowjackets.
Yellowjackets.
I tuned in for a podcast about Severance, but they just kept talking about a show that's not even on yet.
And that they don't plan to watch. They just keep talking about it. All right. Thanks again.
Take care.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.